So today is Thursday, July 2nd, 2020. Could you please state your name?
My name is Sandra Florence Nancy Stang Patarini.
And when and where were you born?
I was born in Chicago, Illinois, on the south side in South Shore Hospital on November 1st, 1937.
And could you tell me your parents' names, please?
My father was Herman William Stang. My mother was Florence Jenny Novak.
And where were they from?
Dad was born in the family home on the east side community of Chicago, and Mother was born in West Salem, or a town very close by.
West Salem.
West Salem, Wisconsin. I'm sorry.
Very good.
And he was born July 27th, 1891, and she was born May 25th, 1902.
Very good. And do you have a memory or information about your grandparents?
No, basically they were dead by the time I was born. Lois, my sister, was 5 or thereabouts when my grandmother died, and my grandfather died a year after I was born.
And do you want to put their names on the record for genealogy or?
Sure, why not? My grandmother was Minnie Brandt Novak, and I believe she was born in West Salem, Wisconsin, although she may have been born in Germany in July of 1876, and she died on May 25th, 1929. She married Charles A. Novak, Nowak. He was born February 11th, 1877. Again, Wisconsin, perhaps not. He died in Galesville, Wisconsin on January 6th, 1939.
Okay. And on your father's side?
Dad's mother was Louise Lindenberg Stang, and his father was Herman Peter Stang. He was born March 27th, 1859, and died in 1913. He was born in Gartz, Germany, and died in Long Beach, California. And he came to America in 1884. And I have this a little mixed up. I just added this. And Louise's family may have been near Stettin, Germany, and came to America around 1883.
And your parents have any siblings?
My mother had a sister that was 7 years younger. Her name was Lillian. She married Ed Weirs, and so she was Lillian Novak, and that was it, just the 2 girls.
And your father?
Dad was the middle of 5 kids, actually maybe 6. Uncle Henry was the oldest, then Uncle Paul, then Dad, who was born in 1891, and then 2 years later, Martha was born. She later married Glenn Marks, and then a baby girl was born and named Louise, and only lived a couple of months. She was born during the summer and died in November. And then they had another daughter, also named Louise, who drowned when she was about 16 or 17 years old. So that was the family.
Okay, very good. And your siblings?
I have one sister who was 14 years older than me, Lois Ann Lillian Stang Holman. She was born September 2nd, 1923 in Chicago, Illinois. Our father was a plasterer all his life, from age 18 till 82.
Okay. And where did you grow up?
I grew up living at 10431 Avenue G in Chicago, in the community called the East Side. And we lived it. My parents bought the house and they lived in it almost their entire married life, and sold it many, many years later in 1986.
And do you have any recollections of the end of the Depression or the war years or anything along those? You would have been just a child.
The Depression, both Pat and I came at the end of it, so we really don't have recollections of the Depression other than it affected our parents and our siblings tremendously in so many ways. But yes, I do remember some of the war years, and my dad, as I said, was a plasterer all of his life, except during the war. He couldn't get any work, and he took a job as a night watchman at the chemical plant in Hegewisch, Illinois. And he was a ward, I forgot he during the
The blackouts.
the blackouts, he was the chairman of our block, and he had to make sure that everybody had all their lights off and their windows drawn, and so that no light could come through whatsoever. It was very scary. I remember that happening because I was only, I don't know, 5, 6, something like that. And then Lois married Harry during the war, and she and he went to Oregon where he was stationed, and they had their first child, Harry Robert. And when he was sent off to, I think, the Philippines, Lois and we called him Butch, Harry had named him that, moved back to our house and lived there the whole time that Harry was overseas. And basically I was 6 years older than Harry Robert, and you know, they became my siblings. He and his sister Betty and Billy when they came along later. And then Lois moved to an apartment a half a block away from us, and then later to an apartment on Ewing Avenue and on the east side also. And then they bought a house out in Lansing where they lived for the rest of the time till they moved to California.
And where did you go to elementary school? Grammar school?
Back to the, they were called blackouts, and Dad was
Blackout warden.
blackout warden.
Okay, very good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All of a sudden that came. Where did I go? What?
To grammar school.
Gallistel School. My father had also gone to Gallistel, and it was a 4-story school. It was a big school, and it was 2.5 blocks, 3 blocks from home, and it was good. It was a good experience going there, and we had a good crew of kids that went through Gallistel, and most of us went on to Bowen High School from there. And on Avenue G, we had a good bunch of kids to play with. In those days, you went outside. I never woke up in the morning. I never started my day till noon or later. And the rest of the day until it got dark, we were outside playing. And we lived in the middle of the block, and if you went to the north side of the block, there was Barbara and Dickie Rousseff, Rouseff, Rousseff, and across the street was Faye Johnson and her older brother Don and younger brother Wayne, and then Kathy Moore lived next door, and then the Lindstrom girls lived directly across the street from my house. And Hazel Rousseff, Barbara and Dick's mother, knew every game in the world that there was to play outside. It was Mother May I, Giant Step, hopscotch. I mean, we just played and played our hearts out late. As soon as it got dark, it was hide and seek. And then, of course, when the streetlights came on, we had to go home. And it was very safe. The Rousseffs, Johnsons, and Lindstroms all went to the Lutheran school, and Kathy and I were the only ones that went to Gallistel, and that I went to Bowen, and I think Kathy went to St. Francis de Sales. But it was a good bunch to grow up.
Nice. And outside of playing, what sort of other activities did you have either in school or outside of school?
When I turned 16, I got a job as a checker. That was in the grocery stores. That was the thing for a girl to do in those days. In our neighborhood anyway, in our graduation class, you became a checker. And I worked for the A&P in South Chicago, which had many, many interesting things happen throughout each day or week or whatever. And then as a child, my mother and I went back to West Salem, Wisconsin, where she was raised, and my Aunt Sis and Uncle Ed still lived there. And I went there every summer, and she got her Social Security number because she worked in the peat plant during the war years, or maybe just before the war years, the end of the Depression. And my aunt had one child, Ronnie, and he was like a big brother to me. And we remained very good friends, and he was wonderful to be with. And of course then I had all my cousins, because all of the Brandt kids got married and stayed in West Salem. Mother was the only one who had moved away when she got married. And so I had many cousins in those days. And let's see. As a child, like I say, we went, the two of us, Mother and I, back to West Salem, but one year, the year I graduated from grade school, 1951, we went back to Great Bend, Kansas, where a shirt-tail relative, Auntie Weege, lived. And I met that side of the family. And it was fun because there were two children also around my age. So all of a sudden I had cousins that were my age, as opposed to having Lois's kids that basically Lois worked every year, all the time, except when she had her 3 kids. She took a year off. And otherwise, when she was working, I babysat them. I basically, raised them. And it was funny because Lois and I had many similarities. Same ring size, almost the same shoe size, and our voices were identical. And her kids could not tell us apart. And I'd call out the upstairs apartment window when it was time for them to come home. They'd come barreling in, Mommy, Mommy, where are you? And I'd sit there smiling, and where are you? And they'd run through the house, and I'd say, Sandra, was that you calling us? And, yes, that was me. Darn it. But even as the years went by, on the phone, they had to really be careful. They didn't know which one of us it was. And I was so thrilled with those kids that I just couldn't wait to grow up and have my own kids, which I did. I had Lori and Steve. Vacations that we had as family, we always went back to Chicago so that the kids would know their family there and their grandparents, since I never had any grandparents and neither did Pat. It was important to us that they knew these people. And then Shirley and Ron had been to Hawaii, and they asked us if we would like to go with them this one year, and we said, sure, So in January of 1987, the 4 of us went, and it was wonderful. And then Pat and I went again 7 more times. Needless to say, we loved Hawaii. And then we went to the Grand Canyon with our kids. Ah, that is a place. We loved it. We hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. The first time we went, we hiked halfway down, maybe a quarter of the way. What do you think it was, Steve? Half,
Yeah.
a quarter?
Call it half.
And so we're coming back. And we went back, it was either the next year or 2 years later, and we hiked to the bottom of the canyon, stayed overnight at the Phantom Ranch, and then back up. And it's the greatest accomplishment, other than having my 2 kids, that I've physically done in my lifetime. Obituary stuff. Anyway, we went to the bottom of the Grand Canyon the next time. Then Steve and Pat went rim to rim, and I dropped them off at the North Rim, drove to the South Rim, picked them up, and then we went on to California to Pat's relatives. And then Pat and I did a service elder hostel at the Grand Canyon. And it was the hardest I ever worked in my life, but it was the most wonderful week. So the Grand Canyon and Hawaii were big, big, big things.
Okay. Why don't we rewind to your high school years? You were very
Okay.
active in clubs and activities and such.
Yeah, I was a joiner. I didn't have any siblings, so I reached out quite a bit. And I would go for a goal, set it in front of me, and like the carrot in front of a horse, I would go after it. And I was not athletic, and so I did other things to get my B for Bo in my letter. And I belonged to Junior Achievement, and I graduated June 20th, 1955. I was a member of the National Honor Society, and my peers voted me president of the National Honor Society when it was our year, and that was a very big thing that my friends thought enough of me to vote me in. Excuse me. And so that was pretty much Junior Achievement, and in school I go to all the football games every week in the fall.
And did you date in high school?
Yeah, I did a little bit. I did go study with a boy named Jack Sills when I was 16, and he was a nice kid, very nice boy, and from the East Side. And then seemed that when I was in grade school, I guess the movies, I went to the movies a lot when I was little, and boyfriends were apparently the thing in the movies those days. And so Bob Studner was in my class, and he was so good looking, a blonde, blue-eyed, nice guy who had no interest in being my boyfriend, but I wanted him as my boyfriend. But anyway, Bob Studner was the first of the Bobs, and Bobs became a family joke. If I met somebody as named Bob, I was going to date him. There was the Boys of Summer, 1953, Dowagiac, Michigan. There was Bob Deering and Bob Anderson. Bob Deering's family had a cottage, a house, a year-round house there. They had been in our church in Chicago. And Bob Anderson's family had a cottage. So they were the Boys of Summer. Then came Bob Lewis, and Bob Lewis was the Junior Achievement years. And then I was dating Bob Strusenberg. And it turned out that I would date Bob Strusenberg on Friday nights. And I happened to meet this guy that I started to date on Saturday nights. And his name was not Bob, it was Pat. And we'll get back to that later. Not now.
Okay. And when did you learn to drive? And do you remember?
Well, I was raised in a very German household. And my father was very German, and a family only needed one driver in the household, and he was it. My mother had learned to drive before they got married, but as soon as you needed a license, my dad would not let her get a license. And Lois did not get a license, and I did not get a license until after I was married. And so various boyfriends taught me how to drive. I gave more young guys gray hair behind the wheel of their brothers or families' cars than you ever would guess. But I had a well-rounded series of lessons over many years, and I finally got my driver's license after I was married and after we moved to Champaign-Urbana while Pat was going to the University of Illinois.
When did you graduate high school?
I graduated high school June 20th, 1955. I used to laugh. I did all my living in the 50s. I graduated from grade school in June of '51. I graduated from Bowen High School in 1955, and I got married in September 5th, 1959. So from the 51 to 59, I did all my living and settled down, and that was it.
So after graduation from high school, what did you do?
Education was very important to both my parents, and I wanted to go to the University of Illinois, but things happened and didn't, and Dad didn't want me walking through the nightclub area on Rush Street in Chicago to go to Navy Pier. So I went to Wilson Junior College at 67th and South Park, which was a very black neighborhood. So it was okay for me to go to a black neighborhood to go to school, but I couldn't walk through a nightclub area in the daytime to go to the University of Illinois. So I went there my first year, and then my dad turned 65. And I said, I'm not going to be the reason that my father continues to work. Because I'm in college, and he might be sick, but he would want me to get through college, and I didn't want him to do that. So I went to Wilson for 1 year. I dropped out and went to night school at CVS.
Ice cream truck driving by.
Yeah.
Speaking of childhood memories.
Yeah. Good humor trucks, weren't they something? So I went to work for that year, and I went to college at night at, like I say, Chicago Vocational School. Became a night school. Must have been one of the junior colleges at that point. And then I went back to college in 1973. Steve was just going into kindergarten, and must have been first grade. And Lori was 4 years ahead of him. And I could go to school part-time, and so I started back at the junior college, community college in Manchester Community College, and I went there for 2 years. They accepted all my credits from before, and then when Pat finished his PhD in 1973, I went back part-time out to the University of Connecticut and finished my bachelor's degree in business administration.
So let's rewind back to the end of the 50s. So you're out of high school, you went to junior college for a year, and you were working, and you met this other guy not named Bob.
Yeah, I went to a back-to-school party in September of 1957. Now, in high school, I think I've alluded to the fact that I'm not athletic. I was part of the smart kids, but I was not part of the jocks. And Pat's sister, Lottie, was my high school gym teacher, or one of my gym teachers at Bowen High School. And everyone loved Miss Pat. She was single, and she was pretty, and she was firm, but we loved her. And everybody loved her, and they wanted to know as much as they could, and they knew she had a younger brother, and that he was in the Navy. And everybody knew when he got out of the Navy, and everybody knew what college he was going to go to. And many of my friends went to Navy Pier, where he was going, that my father wouldn't let me go to because of Rush Street, okay? But he was going to the pier, and one of the girlfriends of mine from Dale Carnegie, I won a Dale Carnegie scholarship in junior achievement, and in our group was Bob Lewis, and Carol Girac was one of them. And Carol went to the pier and met Pat and liked him. And she was a good dancer, and he was a good dancer. And I knew she really liked him, but she lived on the north side, and we lived on the south side. But I went to this party, and he was there, and I didn't want to have anything to do with him because Carol liked him, and I was honoring her claim on him. And also, I didn't want to have anything to do with the brother of a gym teacher. That would mean he was a jock. And that was not the life I had planned for myself. I was going to get somebody who would get a good job, and I could stay home and raise those wonderful children I was going to have. And that was it. No sports guy. So I didn't want to have anything to do with him. And then we danced, and then we took a walk. And as you go through life and you date, there's people that you're very comfortable with when you're alone and you don't have to talk and you're okay with it, silence. And there's people you meet that there's this uneasy feeling. Well, we went for a walk, and it was the most comfortable thing in the world. I said, uh-oh, big problem, big problem. And he hadn't driven that night, but his buddies did, and he said, do you want to ride home? And I said, sure. And he took me home, and he said, can I call you? I said, sure. I said, let me get paper and pencil, I'll give you my phone number. He said, no, I'll remember it. Well, I'm sure I'd never hear from him again, but I did. And that was the beginning of a wonderful time. And one day we were out, he picked me up from the bowling league at Bowen, and we were talking, and I said, so when he asked me when my birthday was, I asked him when his was, and he said, my birthday is July 27th. Well, I started laughing, and he said, what's going on? I said, oh, nothing, just struck me funny. I said, that's my dad's birthday. Well, that was it. I knew I could live with a guy born on July 27th. I had done it my entire life, and this guy had no idea, but we were going to be married. That was set in stone. That's when I knew. Then all I had to do was convince him. And he was in college, and he wanted to finish. He didn't want to get married and have kids right away and not be able to finish his degree. And he didn't know how important education was in the way I was brought up, but there was no way he was never going to have that. And so that's how we met. And again, I dated Bob Strusenberg on Friday nights and Pat on Saturday nights because he worked. And then very shortly, after a few months, it was just Saturday night dates with Pat. And Bob exited the picture.
And when did you get engaged, or is the story of your engagement anything worth?
No, I really don't remember too much. I had got a beautiful pearl engagement ring with two little diamond chips in hearts on each side of the pearl. It was beautiful, and that was, I guess, in September of '58, and then we were married in September of 1959, and at the East Side East Side Evangelical United Brethren Church, and Lois was my matron of honor, and her daughter Betty was my junior bridesmaid, and I had 5 bridesmaids. I had Flo D'Angelo, Marilyn Banaszak, Barbara Suzuki, and Carol Girock. And that was the beginning of a wonderful marriage, and it'll be 61 years come September, and it's been good. It's been very, very good.
Now there's some drama surrounding the wedding, as I recall.
I didn't know you wanted to get into that.
No, it's good.
Oy, 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 oy. Ah, yes, my dad. When maybe we got engaged in Memorial Day weekend. We went to Indianapolis Speedway from the University of Illinois, and came home and told my folks that we had been there. My mother was sure we had gotten married, and Dad said no. He said no, we're going to get married, and my father laughed. He just laughed. He said, "Do you know what you're getting into, to Pat?" And so he accepted Pat as the guy I was going to marry, and I was working at MK Car Leasing Agency and in Chicago after I quit going to college full time. And so Dad always said, "Don't take me to the hospital. When I get sick and I'm going to die, don't take me to the hospital. I want to die at home." So I'm at work one day, and I get a phone call from Mother, and she says, "Your dad's really sick, very, very, very sick." And the night before, Pat and I were going to write our wedding invitations, because you mailed them 4 weeks ahead in those days, not 4 months. And so Dad wasn't feeling good, and so he was in his bedroom, and we said we were going to do it in the dining room, which would have shed light on his bedroom. We said, let's do it tomorrow. And so tomorrow came, and Mother called and said, "You better get home." Well, I didn't drive. I took the buses everywhere. My dad wouldn't let us get our license, so we certainly didn't have a car to drive. So we ended up, I asked a girl, one of the women I worked with, to drive me, and walked in the house, and Dad said, "Take me to South Chicago Hospital." Well, for somebody who said, "Let me die at home, don't take me to the hospital," the thing he says is, "Take me to the hospital." That was it. It turned out that he diagnosed himself in the emergency room to an intern and told him he had a strangulated hernia, and the guy agreed with him. And I went home, and my mother came there, and she was there, and I went home to shower and everything, and came back. It turns out it was a ruptured appendix, and gangrene had set in, and it was a big mess. Well, we had our wedding plans And we had our reception and our band and our caterers, and everything was in place, and boom, you know, there was only one thing that was happening, two things happening that I knew. September 5th, I was marrying Patarini, and second, my dad was walking me down the aisle. That was it. And so when I asked the doctor a few days later, you know, is Dad going to be okay? He said, you got to decide what's more important, your dad or getting married. So anyway, we ended up changing our entire place to have our reception. We still, of course, had the church, which I wouldn't have gotten married anywhere else but my church. And it was not an easy time, but we got through it, and it was...
And was he able to walk you down the aisle?
He walked me down the aisle. He had food at the reception. We had 2 receptions because he was so sick, and one was at a steakhouse, George Diamond Steakhouse, and that was the relatives from out of town and the immediate family, and then we ended up having it catered by some local people at the American Legion Hall just down the street from where I lived. And Jack Ziltz's mother was the head of the caterers that was doing our reception, which kind of was funny. But by then I think Jack, boyfriend, Bob came out. Jack was married already, so that wasn't too hard a thing to have Mrs. Ziltz there. But anyway, Dad made it there, and he had eaten at the first reception. He got to the second, had a drink or two with relatives, and then went home and rested. And the wedding festivities continued. And we got the wrong wedding cake. Had to have this wonderful wedding cake, and it was supposed to be white with silver leaves and everything on it, with this really great topping of the bride and groom. And they delivered the cake, and we walked in to the reception hall, and there was this horrible cake with bright pink flower roses all over it, and a different top, and I about died. I don't know to this day what I would have done if I could see that bakery person that delivered the wrong cake. But yeah, everybody made it, but Lois made Billy, because he was young, he was about 5, go home, so he wasn't at the reception for maybe 15-20 minutes, less than an hour, and so he was never in any of the pictures. And Phil was there, the youngest of Pat's nephews, and he was able to stay, and he was 1 year older, and so he had taken his role as the youngest there.
So after you're married, where did you settle?
Pat had just finished going to the U of I at Navy Pier the year before, and had gone downstate and was on campus at Illinois, and we bought a 8 by 30 or 35-foot trailer, and we moved to Champaign-Urbana and lived there for the next 3 years. He got his bachelor's degree in June of 1961 and started immediately on his master's degree because it was a very big recession, and there were very few jobs for the graduates. So we said, invest the time now and get your master's, and you'll get a better paying job than you will this year. And of course, I was sure that I could talk him into a baby during that year, but we didn't have one during that year, but I did conceive, and I was pregnant when we left Champaign-Urbana to move out to Manchester, Connecticut in 1962. And Lori was born on December 12th, 1962 at Manchester Hospital, and 4 years later Stephen was born on December 28th, 1966, also in Manchester Memorial Hospital. Dr. Ellsbury delivered Lori, and Dr. Sumner married. Did I say married? Delivered Lori, and Dr. Sumner delivered Steve. And it's been a good home. We've enjoyed living in Connecticut, except that our family was back in Chicago, and that was always hard, because I really loved my family and Pat's. And we made many trips back there and didn't do other vacations, but we did make up for it with the 2 trips out west. And it's been a good life. It's been a very good life. We had wonderful 25th anniversary in our new home in Manchester, a Colonial, and I'm not going to do that year. Can't remember it. And in then in 2009 we had our 50th anniversary, and Steve and Lynn gave us a beautiful, beautiful party, and all of our nephews and nieces, except maybe 1 or 2, made it, and it was just so good. And then 5 years ago we had Pat's 80th birthday, and they all came again for the most part. A couple couldn't, but most did. And we've been blessed with a wonderful immediate family. Our children have always made us very proud. We love them dearly, and our nephews and nieces have all been super, and the ones they married were very good too, and God has blessed us.
Awesome. You finished your degree and got a business administration degree, so after you had raised your kids, you went back to work?
No. That was my insurance policy.
Okay.
Well, as I said, education was very important to my parents, and it was important to me too. And I knew that it was going to have to be something I would never be content without having, was my degree. And I went to school in the fall of 73, 73, and then in March of 1976, I was still going to school. Now I was out at UConn on the main campus, and my husband got very sick, and so I didn't go to work. I stayed at home to make sure that we had a stable household and the kids were in good hands. And Pat was making a very nice salary, so I didn't we didn't need a second salary. We never lived high off the hog, and so we felt that it was more important to be with the kids, since the grandmas weren't there to come in and take care of the kids, or Lois. Lois would have loved to have taken care of the kids when she wasn't working, but I did not go to work full-time then. I went to work part-time to get money for vacations. That was our extra money. And I worked at Manchester Community College for the Dean of Students. And I had a friend who had a store that he needed somebody to relieve him for a couple of hours for lunch break every day, and I went in and helped Paul Cosgrove. And I don't know what else.
Well, when did you start working at OBGYN? When you became?
Oh,
That's what I'm talking about. After the kids were
yeah,
grown.
you guys were gone.
Yeah.
You were in college, and Lori had just graduated from Mount Holyoke, and so I went to work part-time, and it was the OBGYN group that had delivered both of you, and Dr. Smith, Sam Smith, was very excited because he knew Lori that I wanted to work for him. So, you know, he made sure that I was hired, and I worked there part-time. I think it was 7 years. I think that was about it. It was part-time work, and it was good. It was good.
And do you want to, we're sitting here at the cottage in Old Saybrook, do you want to talk a little bit about that? And
once you've lived near water, you have to be within an hour of a large body of water. Or maybe it doesn't even have to be large. I was born and raised in Chicago, and Lake Michigan was always part of my life. And we came to Connecticut, and we were near the Atlantic Ocean, and we ended up purchasing a very small 973 square feet cottage on the water in Old Saybrook, Connecticut in, oh, good grief, well, 26, 27 years, 1993. That was it, of course. How could I forget that? And it's now 2020, and it's been great. It's a very healing atmosphere. I think it's the reason I'm still here. Look out there, see God's plan for the daily tides and the sun and the clouds and the rain and the storms. Tides come in and go out, and we have the sandbars out there. It's been good for both of us, and better for him because Fenwick Golf Course is 3 miles down the road, so he was thrilled to be able to live that close to a golf course, and became a member shortly after we bought. I think he probably was on the list for a year and a half, and his name came up, and he became a member, and has been, and has enjoyed that very much. Even if they don't have a 19th hole cocktail lounge at the end of the it's only an 9-hole golf course, and so it's not a full 18-hole thing, but it's been great for him. And his wife didn't have to be alone for 4 or 5 hours while he golfed a full round of golf with his buddies. And we bought at Water's Edge a timeshare, and I got into water aerobics, which was that and Tai Chi kept me in pretty good shape. And the water has been my happy place.
Anything else you want to add, or any final words of wisdom?
No, I just thank God for the beautiful family, wonderful husband. He's provided us with basically everything we need. We lost our Lori, but even that had its good points. We knew she didn't suffer, and that was good to know. Somebody was with her immediately at the state police. And so that was sad, but we have Stephen, and we have a grandchild, and we have Enrico Valentino Enrico Valentino Patarini, which love to say that name, and he has been the joy of our life. Steve never expected to stay in Connecticut, so we never expected him to, and we ended up buying the cottage, and he met Lynn, and she loved the shoreline, and they ended up in Old Saybrook, and we have been blessed with, I was blessed with having the child that was so much like his father a second time, only this time I had my husband with to share it, and that was just so great. And so thank you, Lord, for everything, and thank you for being such a good son and giving us such a great grandchild, and Lynn is such a sweetheart. We love her dearly, our daughter-in-law, and that's my life, I guess, pretty much. Of course, I can't smell, but we didn't get into that. I had my nose smashed when I was 5 years old on a garbage can in Wisconsin, and they let me go to sleep, and I bled for hours, and woke up. Thank goodness I woke up, and never knew I couldn't smell until I went to Kansas in 1951 when a relative wanted to buy me perfume and asked me to choose it, and I didn't know the difference between any of the bottles. That was my first clue, and the only injury was falling into the garbage can, running to get my sand toys. You asked for more. You should know better, honey.
I think we did good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.